I feel like you're sitting in on our board meetings or something. I feel like you're very finger on the pulse in terms of the things that we talk about. The number one question I always get is like, what is product at TED? I've seen a TED talk, but like, tell me more. So that could be our consumer facing applications. We have a TED mobile app. We have TED.com, which is our main website, TED Connect, plus all of our media tools. So how do we publish it to YouTube or Spotify? We launched this AI dubbing feature with a company called Pangaea.
Can you a little bit more explain about the technicality behind that feature?
Basically a feature that will change the speaker's language, like their mouth movements and their voice will look real, but they're speaking in English. They're actually in Italian or Spanish.
Because I can. C'est l'une de ses capacités magiques.
YouTube is recommending me all these videos about like fun things and entertainment, right? And if I go to the TED application, it's telling me things that I could learn and more serious talks. How do you retain those users? Do you have any concerns about Gen Z not having interest toward these kind of talks? Today, we have another great guest, Tricia Maya, head of the product at TED. Welcome to the podcast. Please introduce yourself and how did you got into the product world?
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Tricia. I have been in product for, I can't count, since 2011. So quite a few years. I basically fell into it as most product managers do. I was very interested in kind of like international development, nonprofits. I was going to work for the Foreign Service and I needed money. So I just got a job at a software startup where I was fortunate enough to be in like a agile scrum shop. So learning about stand-ups and how to work with engineers and clients. And over time, I started to realize that this was a thing called product management. I was really into it. I loved the creativity. And so I just kind of leaned in full force. And over the years, I've worked at other startups. I've worked at kind of Fortune 15 companies. I've worked in professional services. And now I'm back in kind of where I guess my passion began in the nonprofit sector. So it's quite perfect at TED where I can combine my love of product and a mission-driven organization. So that's just my journey at a high level.
That's awesome. I actually looked into your career and you worked at many amazing companies. And then now TED, it's absolutely great. Can you elaborate more on what is the area that you're focusing in TED? Because TED is so massive as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. The number one question I always get is like, what is product at TED? I've seen a TED talk, but like, tell me more. So a very, very common question. The product at TED is many different things. So first of all, functionally, I oversee product management, design, data and analytics, customer support, localization, and probably a few other miscellaneous things, but generally everything around our digital product presence. So that could be our consumer-facing applications. We have a TED mobile app, we have TED.com, which is our main website, but also all of our event technology. So if you go to a TED conference, you have an attendee-facing app, TED Connect. We have all of our staff tools to like check people in and register people. We have a conference website, plus all of our media tools. So once a talk is on the stage, how do we get that talk into the cloud, into the editor's hands, then publish it to all our distribution platforms from TED.com to YouTube or, Spotify for our podcasts. So there's a whole host of consumer facing and internal and media platform and data tools that kind of fall under my purview. And we obviously work hand in hand with our engineering team to execute on all of these digital products.
And so how do you, I just want to know more about, let's say there's like a TED event, right? What are the steps that goes to it? What are the areas that you should focus on? And like a little bit, explain a bit more like how TED as a business is operating, or it's like, how is it even operating? Let's pause here for a second. The other day, I was looking into our channel analytics and I noticed many of you guys are watching a lot of our episodes, but not yet subscribed to our YouTube page or Spotify. I will ask you as a favor, please support us by subscribing to our YouTube page and Spotify page. And I will promise you, I will do everything in my power to make each episode better and better. Thank you.
Yeah. So we started as a conference or event company. It's in our DNA. We produce world-class events all across the world. So distinction that not everybody realizes is that we have our flagship events. So we have an event in Vancouver. We have a new event called TED Next in the fall in Atlanta. And those are official TED events. In addition to TED, we have TEDx, which is basically partner events all across the world. So, if you wanted to start a TEDx for your university or your town, we give you certain brand guidelines, but basically there's a freedom to create the sort of events that work for your community. So we distinguish between those because when we talk about product, we're mostly focusing on our flagship events. The TEDx events run sort of separately. We have internal systems and tools and teams to help them succeed. But from kind of, I'd say more of a product point of view, we spend more time on the flagship events. So for example, we have a conference site. And so if you're interested in exploring going to an event, there's information, it's more of like a marketing experience that leads into an application and registration flow. So obviously very, very product oriented. How do we get the right people to these events, help them, know when they are, to help them pay, and eventually get them to the event itself. Once we're on site, again, all of our staff tools come into play. How do we register people? How do we check them in? How do we help them understand what their schedule is? How do we help them connect with other attendees at the event? So there's a lot that goes into the digital event experience. But then at the event, that's a main content driver for us. So a lot of our content that you can find on YouTube, on our site, most of our famous talks come from flagship TED events. And so it's not just about the event experience. We then feed that into our media engine. So after the event, all of that footage gets edited, uploaded, distributed to various platforms, and then it becomes a media product. So how do we get more eyeballs on our content? How do we improve our search algorithms across different platforms from, search SEO or, YouTube or wherever we are? Like, we want more people to see more TED Talks because that helps expand our reach, our relevance, our impact on the world. And then eventually the cycle starts over. So with every event, we then help people get to the events, we film the content, and it kind of goes on and on and on. I mean, there's a lot more nuance, but that's the general life cycle of our content.
Makes sense. So just to break it down, you have a mobile application, and Rezaei is probably, you have a website, which is also another product. I know that you also stream, and stream is actually pretty difficult as well. For the event, do you have a particular dedicated app which is built by your team that, for example, attendees use it for registration, or you're using any third-party tool?
Yeah, so for actual app registrations and applications, we have a website, conferences.ted.com. So that's where you would go to learn about the event and register. Once you are at the event, we have an mobile application called TED Connect, which is built by our team. And that is, as I mentioned, you come, it's an orientation tool. What are the talks that are coming up? Where are they? Also, who is at this event? Who might I want to connect with or message? And so there's a whole kind of host of tools within that application. It's like your event companion. So that is kind of the primary mechanism for our event application. But then again, we have other than consumer, just media applications. You could be a random person in India watching a TED Talk on our site or our other mobile app, the TED mobile app. So again, just a broad variety of different products.
And is there other internal tools that you have built?
A lot of internal tools. I mean, I think historically the technology team at TED had built a lot because what we were doing was really novel. Like when TED Talks were launched on the internet, no one had done anything similar. So that's kind of why it took off like a rocket ship. And there was this virality that I don't think if we launched today, we would have. It was just something so new and impactful that I think that's what led to a lot of the success. And so our team was building a lot of the systems to like make that happen. Like, how do we stream content on our site? How do we get people to it? How do we handle the load of just increased virality and everything that comes with it? But I joined TED probably 3.5 years ago. And since then we've taken kind of a different approach. And so it's not necessarily just buying everything and partnering with third parties, but it's about finding the right balance. So I'd say that over the last few years, philosophical approach has been like, what do we need to build custom? Like, what do we need to be, have total control over, be best in class at? And, a lot of our conference technology or some of our streaming services, like we felt that they were so integral to our business that like, that's what our team needs to focus on. But as a nonprofit, we don't have unlimited resources. We don't have unlimited people. And so it is really about intentionally selecting partners and third-party integrations that allow us to kind of offload some of the work that in the past our teams were building from scratch. So we take a much more balanced, like build versus buy approach to all of our products. And even in the event space, we've started to do that. Like we've had certain products that, we had a photo booth, for example, which was great, like it's super custom and it had a lot of integration with our core technology. But we found that it was much easier and cheaper just to, there's so many companies out there that specialize literally in like photo booth technology. So we're like, why do we need to build this? Like we should be focusing on our website or our mobile apps instead. And so that's the sort of lens we try to take. And, we've been very fortunate to find really great providers across many different mechanisms, even on our core website, thinking about like personalization engines. Like, do we really have the resources to build our own personalization engine when so many great ones exist? And yeah, if we were Amazon or Microsoft, of course, like we would probably build our own, but we're not. We are a very scrappy team. And so that's another area that, we just recognize where our relative strengths and weaknesses are. And we double down on our strengths and, try to supplement some of our limitations with other providers.
When I started the PM role, I thought all the products that we see, it's just that company building everything, right? But later I came across something called white label solutions.
Yeah.
Like you can even see in the banking sector that if a banking app has like these functionality where you can trade stocks, ETF, and then crypto, there's a very high chance that each of those parts are actually another third-party tool or like an institute behind it. But we see it and it's just integrated so well. We think like, oh, it's probably that specific company or the app.
Yeah. We this is literally my life, is where can we partner really intelligently? And something that's worked really well for us is, I mentioned TED does a million things. We're not just a conference. We're a media company. We're a philanthropic organization. Like we have a lot of internal teams that require product and technology. But as you probably can assume, we don't have all of the people on the team to like give equal weight to every team at all times. And so one of the, I'm a very thematic person. I like to draw kind of like, take a step back and like, what are the underlying themes I'm seeing? How can we solve problems across different areas? And one of the common pain points was general, just like website presence. Like every team needed a website. So TEDx might need a website to tell people how to become a TEDx organizer or attend an event. Our philanthropy teams need their own presence to like show the world about the impact that they're having in our events. And, there's countless initiatives. So we couldn't manage every single one. And so a really strong tool that we've been using for the past few years has been Webflow, honestly. And so we've kind of invested in, our core site as well as like a microsite strategy. And so through that platform, we're able to create design systems, a certain level of continuity across all of our individual stakeholder teams, but also give them the freedom to create. And even if they can't physically go in the Webflow editor and build things themselves, they can partner with a trusted agency. We've worked with a few where we're like, hey, we can't help you, but we've worked with this team. They know our brand. They know our guidelines. Like, tell them what you need. We will oversee it and make sure that, the UX is good and that everything is functioning correctly, but at a higher level. So we don't have to invest in, the details and the weeds because we don't have the time. And that's turning out to be a really successful operation because we're able to balance giving teams the independence that they need, but also having that overarching brand continuity and, again, the design systems that make it seem like we're one company. We're not 10 different ones. So that was an example of like, I need my product managers focusing on our core site, our core apps, and not necessarily some of these, initiative sites that are still super important to TED and our mission. But when we think about like a media operation, like it takes a lot of energy to have a media company. We need to prioritize our people accordingly. So that's been a really interesting partnership.
It's very fascinating, I would say. I really like the approach because you don't want to stop the team. You want to give them the freedom.
Exactly.
They can do what they want to do, but there's going to be a level standard, right? So for example, Webflow has been out there for some time. And if they follow the design language that you talked about, someone kind of oversees that. It doesn't really matter if it's built internally or externally, right?
Yeah.
And also maybe it's more cost effective and you're also faster, right? In terms of like how you can deploy those features.
Right. Because I've also found that if we just say no upfront, like we don't have time to do that, these teams will find a way to meet their goals as they should. So I'd rather meet them halfway, partner with them, make their lives as easy as possible versus just saying no to everything, even though, every product person knows that. It feels like you're just saying no to people all the time, sometimes rightfully so, but they have valid needs, and they have their own audiences that need to be served. And so we just need to be creative about how we serve them.
Yeah, it's good to not be the bottleneck, right?
Yeah.
Everything doesn't necessarily have to go through a PM, right?
Yeah.
We will get exhausted. Other team members will get also exhausted.
Yeah.
And in terms of like partnership, what I really like is, so there are some, let's say, softwares out there, companies that their entire business model is built around partnership, right? Let's say there's, let's say, a crypto exchange that what they do, they offer white label solution. But what I found also very interesting is sometimes you as a PM, you really have to just vision the partnership and then reach out to them and say, hey, we need this. I know you guys never did this kind of partnership. I know you never built your tool in a way that it could be used externally. But what do you think if we could do this? And then many times they say actually yes, and you will be the only partner with them because their business model was not built based on partnership or like basic commission or anything. So you could integrate that platform in an actually better way sometimes.
Yeah, no, Actually, we're working on some things right now that I probably can't talk about, but exactly to that lens, the more that I've grown in my career, I've realized that product is really about partnership, whether that's from just like a brand promotion, like we need, actually a lot of people want to partner with TED for that reason. TED has a very strong brand. We're, again, a scrappy team. We do a lot with not a lot of people, but for whatever reason, the TED brand is still very strong and people want that cachet, or we're known for, education and learning and growth. And so that helps us when we don't have necessarily tons of capital to expend on a partnership. We can bring other assets that other partners value. But I've also, come to really understand the adage that at a certain level in any career, all jobs become sales jobs. Like at the end of the day, and I've talked to my friends in consulting and other areas where they're like, now I'm a managing director, but I got to sell more. That's like my main job. And so, it's not apples to apples everywhere, but even in my current position, I'm like, how do we help TED make more money so that we can invest in our people, in our teams to spread our mission even further? And so a lot of what our teams now are thinking about is not just like feature optimization and making the website better and the app better. It's like, how do we find the right partners so we can scale not 2x, but 5x, 10x in ways that we could never do alone? And so I think, what is it? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go farther, partner or something. Like there's just a lot of good, just like a lot of good data points around what you're saying. And I think that's where a lot of our focus is right now too.
I started as an engineer when I was 15. And, as an engineer, you want to build everything yourself. So I always had this mentality of literally building everything from scratch. And it took me a couple of years to really come out of that mentality and understand that you really cannot build massive, great products if you cannot imagine those partnership or integration of multiple different tools and just stitch them together in a way that for the end user, it looks like everything is done on your product, but it's actually multiple different services.
Yeah. And I think it's, I think it's okay too. Like not everything has to be 100% white labeled. Like I think it's really awesome when you can go to market with a partnership that you're really confident in, that you feel really strongly in. And we did that recently. We launched this AI dubbing feature with a company called Pangaea, who's been a great partner. And they're a small startup, and like we did an assessment across various providers, and they just felt like, even though they hadn't been around a while, they just had a lot of integrity. They had a lot of technical excellence, and there were certain attributes that we felt were very aligned with our values. And so when we launch it, it's basically a feature that will change the speaker's language, like their mouth movements and their voice will look real, but they're speaking in English. They're actually in Italian or Spanish. Like it translates and dubs it, just in a much more modern way, powered by AI. And we proudly put the Pangaea logo on our player in our marketing. Like, we don't want to pretend that we are doing everything ourselves. It's actually really powerful when you can say, we are working with the best in the business to deliver this innovative technology that's solving real user pain points. So again, I think it's also really important to have partners that you're confident in co-promoting, because ultimately that's your reputation and your brand on the line. And so that's something that we think a lot about.
Can you a little bit more explain about the technicality behind that feature? Do they have all these now, I would say, videos? I don't know if it's trained through this model now. It has all those languages, or their models is trained in a way that now it's being applied to these videos. And now each of the TED Talk videos has like English version, Japanese version, Italian version.
Yeah, so one thing that I've learned as we've dabbled in consumer-facing AI deployments is that it is never as easy as it seems. Like, I think especially executives or, your investors, they'll be like, just use AI. It's perfect. It's going to solve all your problems. It's like, yes, and it's really expensive, and it's not always accurate. And there's a lot of, especially as a product person, you want to make it like perfect, and you're very detail oriented. So we launched a few features that, just that show that it's not the push of a button. It's not a silver bullet. So with this AI dubbing feature, Pangaea has their own kind of proprietary technologies and LLMs and, applications that we apply to TED content. So we actually only launched with, I think, 8 talks in 5 languages, because at the time we felt very confident in these 5 languages. Their other translation abilities weren't quite up to par, but it actually was in the beginning, quite a lengthy process. We had to put each talk through, then we had to QA it. So if we wanted to just launch something crappy, we could have, but we wanted to make sure like all of the mouth movements lined up. It sounded really natural. We have an amazing volunteer translator community who creates all of our translations for our content. So we actually fed the Pangaea tool with all of that human quality transcript. So it wasn't just a computer that was making this experience. It was really enabled by human quality transcription and then QA. So these same translators and our team spent a lot of time making sure it looked and felt natural. So we're in the process of launching more languages right now and more talks, but we're hoping that within the next year or a few months, it'll become much more seamless. So the technology will have advanced. We would have given enough feedback that it can be a little bit more plug and play, and we don't have to quality control every single mouth movement. But it is, and they work with other partners doing the same thing, but it's essentially our quality content, their, leading technology. We put it together, and we're hoping to launch it to as much of our library as possible over the, the next years and months.
How many videos are now dubbed like this?
We still have 8, so we're working on our next batch. So after that pilot, we reached out to all, or if not most, of our speakers and was like, hey, this is available. It's totally up to you. That's another thing. We will never, ever translate anything without anyone's permission, or at least dub it without anyone's permission. So it is like also a legal process. It's not like we can just, again, press a button and translate the whole library. We have to go to the speakers, get their permission. They have to sign off on it. Sometimes the speakers are deceased, so it's working with their estates and their families. And so there's a lot more behind the scenes than I think you would realize. But we got a lot of interest, in the fall we sent out the no. We got a lot of interest, so now we're working on actually producing those. So I think in, hopefully Q1 we'll be able to launch another new batch. And we're hoping with the more content that's out there, other speakers will either feel comfortable or at least be open to talking to us about it. Because again, we would never do anything that people aren't comfortable with. It's still somewhat, I don't want to say controversial, but it's like not everyone's super on board with AI generated content. So we'll see how that appetite changes.
So you got
over
a
time.
no answer? No?
Oh, yes, we've gotten no answers. I don't know, maybe we might have even gotten never answers, but
oh, wow.
Again, maybe I'm being dramatic, but yes, we've definitely gotten no's. And so, it's just kind of what's to be expected.
It's very interesting when we think about it. Like, you want to create a seamless experience for the user, right? You have to go all these steps. Even like when you talked about the legal parts, I was really not thinking about like, wow, you're actually right. Like, you really have to ask the speakers if they're like on board with this idea or not.
Yeah. I mean, even little things. I mean, this is not specific to AI, but we have in our player, like, you can select the languages, and there was like a whole debate on like, which flag do you use for which country? Like, is Spanish, do you use the Spain flag? Is that, insulting to other countries that speak Spanish? And so it's like all of these things that you never really think about until you get into the UX. And the details. So yeah, from the legal to the UX to just the technology, there's a lot of factors that are at play, but that's what makes it interesting.
Is there other parts that you used AI or implemented it?
Yeah, so we recently launched a feature that starts to summarize the talk. So you could watch a talk and at the end you get like 3 key takeaways. And so those are AI generated. And that's another example of what I'm talking about is like sometimes the generated snippets aren't really great. Like we had to refine the prompt a lot and like we didn't just want to go to market with something half baked. But I've actually been using it because, a lot of will get asked like, what's your favorite TED Talk? So I'm like, I have to remind myself of like, what are the points? Why did I love this talk? Why was it so impactful to me? And so it'll just, it'll highlight like, what are the key learnings from this talk? And then you can save them to your profile. So if you have a terrible memory like me and you liked something, but you don't know why, or you watched a talk several years ago, your profile will actually start to aggregate the talks you learned, the takeaways that you saved. You're like, oh, that was a really salient point, or I liked that quote. And you can start to make it a little bit more concrete, as well as kind of see some of the topics that you're interested in. It's like, whoa, I watch a lot of talks on psychology. Maybe I should watch other topics to expand my thinking, or maybe I want to lean into that. So we've been leaning into AI for some of those like insight adjacent or focused features to just help people make their learning a little bit more concrete and actionable.
How many people are working at TED? Specifically, I'm talking about like tech product kind of marketing.
Yeah. So the engineering and product team together, we're about like 43 people, I
40.
think. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So,
I don't know why in my mind I was like 400, 5,000.
Yeah, thank you. You should talk to our CEO. Tell him we need more people. No, I'm just kidding. Yes. So my product team is like 15, under 15. Like it's, and that includes again, all those functions that I mentioned, design, analytics. But TED overall, I think is like 200-ish people. So we are quite small for, again, like you have to go to a TED conference. It sounds cliche, but it's like, it is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like it's a world-class event. We have this huge media reach of like our talks touch people in every single country and multiple languages. And yeah, when you look at the size of the team, you're like, well, how do you guys do all that? So it is a compliment when people say that you think we're 10 times as large, but it keeps us like, again, it keeps us scrappy. I keep using that word, but because I think I started my career in more of the startup, small company space. So that's like, I think what I am drawn to, or just really natural for me. It's just like, what does it take to roll up your sleeves, get the job done? Whereas I'm, felt, I think, not uncomfortable, but a little like out of place at companies that were much larger, more bureaucratic. And so it's just what works for us.
Is TED more close to being a startup, or it's more like a mature state company?
I think everyone would maybe have a different answer for you. I think it's definitely more like a startup, just based on, again, I've worked at big companies, I've worked at small companies, and I think the passion and the creativity and the resourcefulness, that for me is what makes me think that, like, I think I would classify us more as a startup. But then you look around, we've technically been around for 40 years. We have this huge, like, global brand that, is a meme, basically, like in a good way. Like everyone knows what a TED Talk is. So it's hard to juxtapose that. But again, we have a lot of those. Like I mentioned, we're a conference company, but we're a media company, but we're a nonprofit. Like you just have to embrace a messy middle, and we're all of those things. So yeah.
No, it's absolutely amazing what you guys have achieved with a team of 40. I really like when you're lean, but you achieve a lot. I think that shows that you're doing the thing right and you're on the right path, rather than like a huge company and then everything gets slowed down. And I thought, again, you guys were like 400 people.
Yeah, I mean, it is like especially I think when you look at fast growing startups, a lot of them are really small. I mean, we do have the also like somewhat burden of like, we've been around for a while. So we do have some legacy systems, and it's not as easy if we were just like starting, from scratch. That's easy. Like when you have the world is your oyster, and you have like a blank canvas and a white slate for building, I think you're just able to move faster. And you're right. Like as you add more people, it, inadvertently will slow you down. And so, yeah, I think our team, I'm biased, but I think our team is very productive and amazing. And we deal with the cards we're dealt. So, yeah.
And how's the product hierarchy? And the company? Do you have a CPO and then?
Yeah. No, it's just me. So I lead the product team. And then I would say we're relatively flat. So we have, group product managers that will oversee a few different areas or just like equivalent in other functions like group level leads. But I still directly manage a lot of the team, or even if I'm not directly managing, like I'm often in the weeds of the projects and just making sure like I have a finger on the pulse in terms of what we're doing, the impact that we're having, because ultimately, well, I need to know, I need to report to our management and our leadership and our stakeholders. So I would say, yeah, we're not super hierarchical, and maybe that's just a function of our size. We're not huge, so we don't need to be that way. But I also find the team is just very collaborative. Whether you're a senior product manager, group product manager, director, doesn't matter as much. Everyone works together really well. And, I think I love that environment. And again, if we were a team twice the size, I don't know if that would be as easy to maintain. So that's just sort of how we're structured.
You bring back the users to the platform because I imagine it like this. Maybe this is not a good comparison, but if I go on YouTube is recommending me all these videos about like fun things and entertainment, right?
Yeah.
And if I go to the TED application, it's telling me things that I could learn and more serious talks, right? So if I have to choose, I will go on YouTube, right? So I was just curious, like, how do you retain those users?
Great question. We talk about this a lot. So one of the ways is through kind of exclusive feature development. So that AI dubbing product I mentioned, that's only available on our website. These AI takeaways that I also just talked about, only available on our website. We're going to invest a lot in the app next year. So similarly, we're going to build value-added features on top of our content that you can't get elsewhere. So that's one of the ways. But in general, and then this is where it veers into marketing a little bit too. I think it's just, what is our story and what are we telling the world? We like to see ourselves as the antidote to doom scrolling. So it's like, if you want to go on Instagram, Reels, or TikTok and just scroll for hours and watch like cat videos, do it. Like, that's cool. Like, that's you do you. But we have to recognize we are not for everybody. Like, our persona, our main user, is generally someone who's interested in personal or professional growth. They value learning. They value like habit building. And so we often see, I see this in the App Store reviews or other, just other feedback from users. People sometimes make TED Talks a part of their daily routine. So like, they'll go for a 30-minute workout and then they'll listen to a TED Talk on a new topic, and then they'll go clean their house, or like whatever it is. I find that to be the really interesting use case, is like people building that into their routine. Other use cases, like, interestingly, our app in particular is used for language learning. People use our subtitles and our talks to really develop their language skills. And so that is something that naturally keeps people coming back. It's high quality content. It's also conversational. You're not learning the basics of like, what's the word for cat or water or whatever. You're mastering a certain level of proficiency just by hearing topics being spoken about, reading, again, the human quality transcripts of the recording or of the talk. So I think there's different jobs to be done, so to speak, for that the site and the app provides that you can't get on YouTube. But at the end of the day, it's like, not everybody wants those things, and that's okay. And so for us, it's really about focusing on who are those core users, what are they trying to achieve, and everyone else, it's like, they don't matter as much. And so I think that's the importance of really being 100% clear on who your target audience is.
Do you have any concerns about Gen Z not having interest toward these kind of talks, and they're just in fast-paced scrolling platforms like TikTok?
I feel like you're sitting in on our board meetings or something. I feel like you're very, very giving finger on the pulse in terms of honestly the things that we talk about. And, I know that we've actually made a big push into TikTok over the past few years. TBD what happens with TikTok. But anyway, like, not everybody has time to watch an 18-minute talk, and like, that's okay. And maybe we need to adapt our not just our length, but also our format. So we've, not necessarily the product team as much, but our media teams, our curation teams, they're thinking about like, yes, there is a moment for someone to stand on a giant red circle and proclaim their like life's mission to the world. But, interviews and podcasts and other other media types are wildly successful. And so how do we take that, quality content that we have and just not repurpose it, but actually create it in new ways that is appealing to audiences? But yeah, especially our social platforms are really where we're trying to attract. And I think we've made a lot of progress in attracting younger audiences, Gen Z, because we take the juiciest moments from the talk. We, put them in an interesting format, the same way that you're talking about, clipping your content. It's about attracting them. And then, a portion of that audience might be interested enough to watch the full talk. And again, it doesn't have to be everyone. Not everyone, our content is not for everyone, but it's about making sure we're reaching the people that it is for and enticing them enough to come into our world and engage with us. So we've had to force ourselves to think differently about content length, content format. And I would say it's still definitely a work in progress, but it's a big focus for us for the future, because we want to be relevant. We don't want to just be relevant with like aging millennials or, Gen Xers or whomever. Like, they're super important. I'm one of them, but we have to think about the future too, and just, how content consumption is changing, and just be honest with ourselves about that.
That's very interesting, because when I started this podcast, this is exactly what I had in my mind. I knew there's great podcasts out there. Like, they're doing great. I can't compete with them. I don't want to compete with them, right? What they're talking about is just senior, more type of topics, right? But what about like up and coming, product managers, people who are just a developer for 1 or 2 years, they're thinking about transitioning. So I could focus on that area, and I could do the things that the Gen Z likes more than the other product platforms. So it's very interesting that you're kind of changing this direction with focusing maybe on TikTok with short clips and bringing those new users to become more aware of this is TED, this is what we are doing. If you're more interested, you can come on our platform and watch like the full 18-minute video of it.
Yeah. No, that's smart. And I mean, I know this is not really about TED, but what you're saying, I love, I listen to all the product podcasts and I think they're great, but at a certain level, I think one of my gripes with them is that it's just this perception of perfection. Like, for these people, it's just like everything goes right, or this is, progression is a linear up and to the right sort of move. And I mean, not everyone is as black and white as that, but I think, to your point, there's maybe not enough voices for younger up and coming PMs that need to know that it's not all sunshine and roses, that there's a lot of difficulties and setbacks, and hearing from people who have those stories, I think, is really important, and it is a void. So kudos to you.
Thank you so much. I want to ask you that, so when you push out this AI dubbing feature, how did you measure it, and how do you think actually the customers are happy about it to double down on this and expand for another quarter?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we look at some of our KPIs in general are like talk starts, talk completes, like how many people are, doing those actions. And so for us, that was important to measure, but we wanted to pay attention specifically to non-English users. Like, part of this release was about attracting, to what I was just saying, attracting people who were not maybe in our orbit. How do we get them? Like, our content was inaccessible to people. Now it is accessible. How do we let those people know, like, hey, we're here, you can come watch our stuff? So we looked a lot at non-English browser views, and then we looked at the same KPIs. We just cut that by a different audience segment. So we did see a 26% increase in video completes. We saw a similar increase in video starts, and we segmented that by regions and got more granular. But we wanted, I think it's really important when you launch something, is like, from the get-go, just defining very clearly what you're trying to achieve. Like, what do you want to come out of this launch? And for us, it was about expanding our reach, especially into non-English speaking communities and audiences. And so, there's a lot more work to be done. And, we saw good early momentum, but of course, like, there's areas for improvement and things we want to build upon. But I think another important piece of it was qualitative feedback. And you don't always talk about qualitative feedback as much, I think, especially in the product community, especially for consumer applications where you do have tons of quantitative data. Like, obviously that's hugely important, but I personally love reading our app store reviews. I love reading our social media posts. Like, we did some promotion on social media, and I just loved seeing, what people were saying. It's just like, I'm finally able to understand this talk in my language. Like, I got a surface level understanding before, but now I really understand it. Those sorts of comments are yeah, they're not maybe statistically significant, or it could just be one person's opinion, but those provide for me the fuel to be like, okay, we are making an impact, like it's touching someone's life, like let's keep going. As long as the quantitative numbers are moving in a similar direction, but I'm a very qualitative, human social sciences sort of person, so that I have a soft spot for that sort of feedback as well.
That's great. And how the future of TED gonna look like?
A big question.
Can you share a little bit of that?
All of our conferences are about the future, the future of something. So I feel like everything TED does is about the future. But what's the future for TED? That's a meta question. Yeah, I think that, like I was saying before, we've been fortunate to have a very strong brand, brand power and just like relevance in the world. But we don't want to rest on our laurels. And to your point, people are changing. The younger generations are consuming content in different ways. So we have to be one step ahead and not rest on those laurels to say we've been a big deal in the past, we'll be a big deal in the future. Like there's a world where, that doesn't happen. And so for us being humble and, having that humility to drive progress and move us forward, I think is really, really key. And so when we think about our products, making them accessible to younger audiences, like our conferences are quite expensive. Our main conference in Vancouver is upwards of, more than $12,000 a ticket, like for a standard ticket. So it's quite expensive, but we recently launched a new event, TED Next, which is a fraction of the price. It's really meant to be a different type of event. And I think you're going to see TED doing more of those things, not just in events, but the podcast we produce, they'll be also more international. There's just like a focus across all of our products and offerings that I think will really lean into our global communities, really lean into our younger audiences or fostering those younger audiences. And from a product perspective, we'll do the same. Like we are really interested in doubling down on our huge global audiences. So these, this AI dubbing is just one of the things, but like if people are learning languages through us, like let's make it even easier or better. Like let's work with the people that we have and the audiences that are coming to us naturally and continuing to make that experience great. So yeah, I'd say in general, just more global, more focus on, up and coming generations, more focus maybe on learning and growing and providing tools for people to learn and grow with TED. Again, that's just built on top of our content. So yeah, I'm really excited for the future of TED, and I hope people come along with us on the journey.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. We are slowly getting close to the end of the episode. Is there something you would like to share with the listeners to check out?
First of all, if you're not sure where to get started with TED content, we have an awesome newsletter called TED Recommends. You can sign up on our website, ted.com/newsletters. We also have a daily newsletter, TED Talks Daily, if you're interested in tech. So I would just sign up for our newsletters, start to, like I mentioned before, build those habits with our content. And sometimes it can be overwhelming. We have thousands and thousands of talks. But if you want to build, you exercise your body, if you want to exercise your mind, that's a really great place to start. That's all I got for right now. I need to create a website or something. But
awesome, for sure. Yeah, we will put the link also in the description. So any of the listeners, you can just click there and find the newsletter, and also go on LinkedIn and connect with Tricia.
Yes, connect with me. Also, if you have any feedback on our website, our app, or TED in general, our talks, our content, I will either absorb it or get it to the right person. But yeah, we want to, again, like I mentioned, we want to make sure we're reaching more and more people with our content, and we have a lot of it. So let us know how we can do better.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining this episode. It's been a great talk.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye.
Wow, you made it till the end. I'm very proud of you. Comment down below which part of the podcast did you like the most and who should I interview next. Also, on the screen, you will see a lot of our other great episodes that you should definitely check out.